The U.S. government just admitted that they violated an immigration judge's order by deporting a Maryland man who's a father to a U.S. citizen to one of the world's most notorious prisons in El Salvador because of what they're calling an administrative error. The man was legally protected by an immigration judge's order and had no criminal record. Here's what happened. Kilmer Armado Abrego-Garcia is a Salvadoran national who was granted protection from deportation to El Salvador back in 2019 by an immigration judge. And the whole basis for an immigration judge allowing him to have such protection was because he established that he would likely be tortured if returned to El Salvador. Now, apparently years ago, he was identified by a confidential informant as somebody who was part of the MS-13 gang. This claim was without evidence. However, he was ultimately granted protection under the Convention Against Torture, meaning that he could not be deported to El Salvador. But earlier this month, ICE stopped him and said that his status had changed. Without reopening his case, without giving him notice, and without giving him a chance to fight back, as the law requires. They detained him, transferred him to Texas, and on March 15th, ICE deported him to El Salvador anyway. He's now imprisoned in a mega prison in El Salvador that's notoriously known for human rights abuses. And the U.S. government has admitted in a sworn court filing that it was an administrative error. They admitted that they deported him when they weren't supposed to deport him to El Salvador. But here's where it gets worse. They're now saying because he is no longer in U.S. custody, the court cannot order the government to bring him back. And they can't force El Salvador to release him either. Now, his lawyers are obviously fighting very hard to get him back to the United States. But the U.S. government's position is pretty much like, oops, it's too late. We can't get him back. And he's not our problem anymore. And in the court filing, they had the audacity to argue that he didn't prove that he'd actually be tortured in El Salvador, even though an immigration judge already made that finding. Law says that the government can only undo that protection that he received back in 2019 by filing a motion to reopen his case, giving him a full hearing with notice, evidence, and a chance to fight back. But they didn't do that. They just deported him. And that's a clear violation of due process, not to mention a major human rights abuse. If this is allowed to stand, it's not just immigrants who should be worried. When the government can break the law and strip people of their rights without consequence, no one is safe, not even U.S. citizens. Hopefully people are paying attention because this is how human rights violations happen right under our nose. And this man and his family are living that nightmare right now. For more immigration news and information, feel free to give us a follow.